All right, hello and welcome everybody. I hope you're doing very well today. My name is Jason Hamilton, and I'm the founder of this group and page, and I'm also the founder of Keep It Simple Financial Planning. What I try to do every Sunday is bring you a high quality training of some sort when it comes to preparing or being better prepared for retirement. So today we're going to talk about a response to one of the questions I asked a couple weeks ago, which is what's on your mind today for retirement. And someone had mentioned a question around, how do you really plan for Roth conversion? What are some things you should be thinking about? And what should I be considering when it comes to taxes, around that particular subject? So that question had, I think, 43 people like it. And so I thought it might be of interest. So today we're going to dive into that subject. Before we do, I want to check in with you and just ask you to throw something in the comments about what you're grateful for today. We just got done with the Thanksgiving holiday. I'd love to hear as well. How was your Thanksgiving holiday? For us, it was quite nice. Got to spend some time with some friends here and ate way too much, of course, and got a fridge full of honey baked ham, turkey, mashed potatoes, and all that other good stuff that we get around the holiday season. So as we're getting started up here, we're going to give everybody a minute to just check in, and then we're going to jump into today's workshop. So can you verify for me as well that everything's coming through okay? Sound is good, visual is good. I want to make sure it's clear and everything is coming through well. So if you can let me know, that would be great. And also let me know what you're thankful for today. So let's see here what we got going on. All right. So who has questions here, first of all, about Roth conversions? If you have a question, go ahead and put those in the comments as well. And I'll do my best to get to those as soon as I possibly can. And we'll talk about that. But I'd like to get your comments up here and see what I can see. Okay, good. Good. Everything looks like it's coming through well. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Robin. I appreciate you confirming that. So if you have something you're grateful for today, go ahead and put that in the comments. I'm going to bring that over. I'm going to bring our workshop over here and get us lined up so we can talk about our famous Roth conversions today. So I think almost everybody I've spoken to planning for retirement wants to find a way to plan for taxes, to reduce taxes in the future, and to keep more of their hard-earned money that they deferred probably for 20, 30 plus years preparing for retirement. So if you're somebody who has a 401k, you have money in an IRA, where you have money that you've deferred taxes on because you put in money pre-tax, and you took the tax deduction each year along the way. Well, now you're probably getting to retirement and you might be considering, well, okay, shoot, now I have to get this money out of these accounts. What can I do to keep my taxes as low as possible, right? So just so you know, the IRS really wants to get their money from you, okay? They're very determined to get their money, and they've even created a rule called a required minimum distribution, okay? So what that means is if you turn 72 in 2020 or later, your required minimum distribution is going to be starting at 72. If you turned 70 and a half, which is what it was prior in before 2020, then you might already be taking required distributions. From what I know about this group here, most of you have not turned 72 yet, so most likely you're going to be looking at planning for 72. Okay, when you hit 72, what's going to happen is you're going to be forced to take a certain percentage of your money out of all your pre-tax accounts. Okay, that is called a required minimum distribution. Okay, your first year withdrawals is just under 4%, but then that number does increase over time. And in most cases, the goal of the IRS is to get you to empty out all of your IRA money by about 85 or 86 years old. So they want to get that money before you hit your general life expectancy, which if you are in your 60s is more in the range of 84 to 86. Not that 76 number you probably have heard of before. The life expectancy of 76 includes from birth. Okay, so that includes infant mortality. If you're already in your 60s, you're more than likely to be in your mid 80s as an average, which means 50% of you will live longer and 50% of you will not quite live that long. So that is our average age. And that's when the IRS wants you to kind of get that money out of those accounts. If you are in your, let's say, late 50s and early 60s, you're facing some different questions than you may be if you're already in your 70s. Okay, once you're in your 70s, you're probably taking your Social Security, all your pensions, everything like that, and your RMDs are already started. If you're younger than 70, then there's still probably some good questions you might have, such as when do I take my Social Security benefit? When do I claim my pension? Should I take a lump sum for my pension, or should I, take the annuity payment? What if I have to deal with things like healthcare limitations when it comes to retiring before 65? Because you may be faced with an income limitation to qualify for things like ACA, the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, that is income-based at that point. So there's a lot of questions that come into all these decisions around retirement. And I'm going to dive into some of those today. We're going to talk about some times when it may or may not make sense to do a Roth conversion. But there's a lot of considerations here. So these are the questions that you want to ask yourself. So I'd highly recommend you take down or get out a pen and paper and take down these questions I'm asking so that you can get these answered for yourself, okay? Because I think they're very, very important. So let's pull this up here. Give me just a moment. All right. Okay, perfect. Looks like everything is coming through well. All right, so the title of today's workshop is called, Should You Consider Doing a Roth Conversion? All right, so we're going to dive into this subject. But before we do, as always, I have to bring up my disclaimer information, let you know that everything we talk about today is not meant to be individual tax, legal, or accounting advice. No sort of financial advice is being done here. This is really about education. And what I want to do is make you a more empowered consumer when you are looking to make these decisions, okay? But this is not individualized advice of any sort, okay? All right, so when considering a Roth conversion, there are many factors to consider, okay? And many factors to include. So we're going to talk about some of those today. But, I guess I didn't put my headline in there, so excuse that. But the couple of main things to consider are, number one, current and future tax rates. If you expect to, where you expect that taxes to be now and in the future, state tax rates, estate tax rates, who the beneficiaries of your retirement accounts are, if you expect your beneficiaries to be subject to high tax rates in the future, and if you have cash outside of your retirement accounts to pay the income taxes on the conversion, and there's some more. So we're going to get into that. And of course, you gotta love doing these videos live. You missed a headline. It is what it is, but hopefully you guys get the point here. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's a lot of things to consider. So this is why we always recommend that you work with a qualified financial advisor or tax professional before you make these decisions, especially on whether a Roth conversion is right for you. But there's still a lot of things that we can take away and learn when this tax planning technique may be considered. So it might be worthwhile for you to consider, looking into something like this and making sure that it's the right procedure for you. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit here. All right. So here's something to consider. Number one question: are the beneficiaries of your retirement accounts qualified charitable organizations? Okay. So if you're planning to give all of your money to a qualified charitable organization, and so the beneficiaries on your accounts are a qualified charitable organization, in this case, a Roth conversion, it probably doesn't make sense. Okay, it doesn't offer a lot of advantage. So what you want to look at there, if you're looking at giving to charitable organizations, qualified charitable organizations, is considering making what are called QCD, so a qualified charitable distribution during your lifetime, and transferring your traditional retirement accounts at death. Okay, so if this is the case, then you may want to, consider not doing a Roth conversion. Okay, but if not, then we want to continue down here and see what else may be of value to you. Okay, the next question you want to ask yourself is: do you expect your income taxes to be lower in retirement due to income levels or future tax reform? Okay. So in the subject of do I expect taxes to be lower in the future, I'm pretty negative on that. I think taxes are going to go up in the future. If you look at what's going on in the political world, our current, so-called president-elect at this time has said he wants to raise taxes on people making above $400,000. And I've also heard him say that he wants to get rid of Trump's tax cuts, which may mean below $400,000. So there's a little bit of confusion there. It's not totally clear at this point. But it really seems like our country is maybe moving more towards higher taxes in the future. Okay? Something else to consider is, are you going to have gaps in your income that may give you lower taxes for a short period? Okay, so we've been talking about this the last couple weeks here. I'm going to pull up this example again that we've used. So in this case here, let's see if I can get a better demonstration here. Okay, in this case here, this is the tax map of a example that we've done the last couple weeks. Okay, So this client, from age 64 to age 72, is going to have basically no income at this point, okay? No earned income, no income sources, no pensions or anything like that. But once they hit 72, then they're going to have a big spike in income starting because of their required minimum distributions. So even though this client's taxes aren't expected to be lower forever in the future, they are going to have a gap here between 64 and 72. So in this case, we might want to really take advantage of doing a Roth conversion in these years for this particular client. So that's something you want to look at is, do you expect your income taxes to be lower in retirement? Maybe not forever, but different time periods. And then also, do you believe that taxes are going to be going up in the future? If you think taxes will be lower in the future, then maybe you want to not do a conversion, but that's going to be something you want to look into at that point, okay? And you want to make that decision based on your overall situation. So if you're at a place where maybe you're in your, let's say, 60 or 61 years old, you haven't taken Social Security yet, you haven't had any pensions come in, and you know you have a few years before you want to claim those particular benefits, well, then you might be a really good candidate for a partial Roth conversion to consider, okay? All right. Our next question here that you want to consider. Do you have cash outside of your retirement accounts to pay the income taxes that will be due upon conversion, okay? So ideally, we do not want to take money out of our retirement funds, out of our tax-deferred accounts to pay taxes, okay, on a conversion. It's not always the case that you have to have cash outside, but it does decrease the benefit of the conversion. But if you have a long time horizon, then using some of the money inside your retirement account could make sense to pay the taxes. But generally, ideally, you want to have some cash or maybe a taxable account, a brokerage account, or some cash equivalent. So CDs, things like that are sitting around, that you might be able to use some of that money that is non-retirement money to be able to pay the taxes on your conversion. So if that's the case, and you might want to consider doing a Roth conversion, because the beautiful thing about getting your money into a Roth IRA is that you will not have to have a required minimum distribution, as I was discussing at the beginning of our workshop today. So traditional accounts, traditional IRAs, 401ks, have requirements that you will have to take the money out at 72, regardless of if you need the money or not. That's called your required minimum distribution. Money in Roth IRA accounts have an additional benefit that there's no taxes due. There's no required minimum distribution, and there'll be no future taxes due on the growth as well. So this will allow your account to grow tax-free, and so that could be a really beautiful thing if this is you do have some cash outside, or you have a long time horizon and you want to use some money inside of the IRA. Okay. Another question that comes up is, how much tax will you have to pay if you consider doing a conversion? Okay. So this is a tax table here and this is for 2020. This is a tax table here that will help you estimate the amount of tax you might need to pay if you wanted to look at considering doing a conversion. Okay. So if you haven't yet, I do recommend you download my 2021 key financial numbers that was in the group. I posted it earlier this week. And I do recommend you download that so that you can have the reference numbers for 2021 and beyond. But I'm using 2020 for today for this particular workshop. And so what you have to consider here is depending where your income level starts, okay? If you have Social Security income, if you have pension income, you're going to fill up the lower tax brackets, okay? You're going to fill those up with some of that. But if you have no other income, well, what you're going to first start with is your standard deduction, okay? Your standard deduction is where you're going to start. So if you wanted to convert over and you had no other income of any sort, let me pull up my cheat sheet here. The standard deduction for 2020 is $12,400, okay? So you would pay no federal tax on the first $12,400. And then if you look here on the tax rate here under the 10%, where it says 0 to 98.75, this is for a single filer, you're going to pay 10% of that amount of money you convert over, okay? So let's say you fill up your whole 10% bracket. Well, if you look down at the next line there under 12%, you're going to see that you'll be paying $987.50 for that 0 to 98.75 amount of money you converted over. And then once you get past 98.75 of conversion, you're going to enter into the 12% bracket, okay? So the 12% bracket is going to be from $98.76 to $40,125 for a single filer. So what that means is if you fill up your 10% bracket and your 12% bracket, you're gonna have to pay $987.50 for that 10% amount conversion, and then an additional up to $99,875 for your 12% bracket conversion. Okay, so in this year you would need just under $11,000 worth of cash outside of your IRA to pay the taxes if you wanted to convert all the way up to the top of the 12% bracket and you were a single filer. Okay, I will remind you that the tax bracket you choose is going to be very individualized. There's not really a standard bracket. Many times I see the 10% bracket being the right bracket to convert for. A lot of times it's a 12%, and then sometimes it's a 22% bracket. The 22% bracket generally makes the most sense if you're somebody who's expected to have high taxable income later, like a high taxable floor of income. So if you have large Social Security benefits or a large pension, 22% conversions early on can a lot of times make the most sense. But for many people, 10 and 12% seems to be more common, but you really want to look at your individual situation, okay? So let's jump over to the married filing jointly tax bracket for just a moment. So similar with the single brackets, just higher numbers. For 2020, the standard deduction where you'll pay no tax on your conversion if you had no other income for federal taxes would be $24,800. So you can convert over your initial $24,800 and have no federal tax owed. And then from the next $19,750 of conversion, you'll be in the 10% bracket there. So you'd pay 10% of that, which would be the $1,975 that you would owe. And then you'll enter the 12% bracket. So if you were to max out up to the 12% bracket and you have no other income and you're married filing jointly tax filer, then you would have to pay $19,750 plus another $1,975 to cover the taxes in those particular brackets. Okay. So what we don't want to forget about here is there's also going to be state brackets. I'm going to touch on that in just a second because that I'm going to actually talk about more next week because that's a whole nother subject. Okay. But sometimes I think a lot of people don't realize how much taxes they're going to need to pay. So if you were going to convert over, in the neighborhood of $80,000 to your from a traditional IRA or 401k to a Roth IRA, you got to be prepared, to have somewhere in a neighborhood of maybe $20,000 plus to pay those taxes at the end of the year. Okay, so something to consider as well is starting with the new Tax Cut and Jobs Act. If you were to do a conversion, you can no longer convert back if you were to convert early in the year. Okay, so generally later in the year is a better time, but something to consider as well is if the market is down a certain amount that you feel comfortable with, and maybe that's, I don't know what the number is, I'm not going to advise you on that, but if the market's down, like earlier this year, we had that big coronavirus drop. It was over 30% depending on your particular allocation. Well, if you were to convert early in the year at that point, you could convert about 30% more shares over to your Roth IRA. So as the numbers, as the accounts came back, which most have by this point in the year, you'd have 30% more shares in your Roth account because you took advantage of that earlier conversion. The downside to that would be is if the market took a bigger decrease later in the year, you could no longer do what's called recharacterizing and going back and then moving more money back over. Unfortunately, they took that ability away in the new tax plan, but still, if you took advantage of that, then that would be something good to consider. You also want to consider that your taxes are going to be owed throughout the year as you earn the money. Okay, so if you have an earlier Roth conversion, you may want to pay the IRS some of your estimated tax early on so that you don't have any sort of late tax penalty going to the end of the year. Okay, hopefully that makes sense there. Okay, the next question we want to consider is, do you expect your beneficiaries to be subject to high income tax rates in the future? Okay, so this one is obviously a little bit challenging to consider. But if you, and let's talk about non-spouse beneficiaries, okay? Because if you have a spousal beneficiary, they're going to be essentially subject to your tax rate. But at the same time, if you're married and one of the spouses passes away early, you have about 2 years where you can claim the married filing joint tax rates, and then you're going to drop to the single tax rates. So you may see a big spike in your income taxes owed even for a spousal beneficiary. But the bigger consideration with Roth conversions, I think, is more of your beneficiaries and more of non-spousal beneficiaries. So, for example, if your children are expected to be in a high tax bracket, you have successful children, they're business owners or doctors, lawyers, whatever it may be, and they're going to be in a high tax bracket when they possibly could inherit your account. If you're 50 or 60 now or 70 now, well, maybe by the time you pass away, your kids might be in their 50s or 60s, and they might be in their highest earning years at that point. So if your kids are going to be inheriting your traditional accounts and their effective tax rate is 25%, 30%, or maybe even more, and let's say they're going to inherit a $2 million IRA at that point, well, you have to remember there was a change in the 2020 CARES Act where now all IRA accounts have to be distributed within 10 years after death, okay, to non-spousal beneficiaries, unless there's one of the exceptions. So if your children are going to inherit a large pre-tax account, and let's say they have to add $2 million of additional income over a 10-year period, and it's all in a pre-tax account, well, you may be giving away 30, 40, 50%, or maybe more of that account by keeping it all in traditional. Well, if that's the case, then you might be a great candidate to consider doing some partial Roth conversions early on right now so that you can protect that legacy and have your beneficiaries inherit that account tax-free if the money's in a Roth account. I know you may not be have a priority of your beneficiaries inheriting the account, but it's still something to think about. And then, I also want you to think about if you are married, think about your spouse as well, that maybe you're not concerned today because you want to make sure you enjoy your money first. And if anything's left over, then the kids get it. That's not a problem. But if your spouse ends up being single and going to single tax rates, and now they have a big required minimum distribution coming in, well, we could really affect them having increases in not only taxes, but also possibly on things like Medicare and Social Security taxes. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But these are all things you want to consider. Okay. Another consideration here is, will you need distributions from your Roth IRA if you were to do conversions within 5 years of converting? Okay. So if the answer is yes, and you want to be mindful of the 5-year rule. Okay. So the 5-year rule is kind of a whole nother subject. I don't want to go down a rabbit trail here, but there is a 5-year rule that if you convert money from a traditional account to a Roth IRA, technically you should be waiting 5 years to take the money out. There are some exceptions though, okay? There are some exceptions, and one of them is being 59 and a half, okay? So if you're going to be 59 and a half, then that might be an exception that comes into play there, where all of the distribution may not have a penalty of some sort. But if you are going to be taking money out prior to 5 years from a Roth IRA because you're going to need that money, then you might want to consider there could be a 10% penalty. And so that's something you might want to look at when you consider whether this is a right procedure for you or not. Okay. All right. This next question is probably the biggest one you need to be concerned about if you're in this particular group. Most of you folks here are somewhere between 55 and 65. I mean, that's the majority of folks here, and you're planning for retirement. Many of you haven't retired yet, and you're looking at this huge headache of dealing with healthcare prior to Medicare age, which is 65. Okay, you may or may not know that if you leave work, okay, and you're going to leave work more than 18 months before 65, so that means there's a window of 18 months where you can use something like COBRA. And what COBRA is essentially you're paying the full price of your current workplace plan, and you can pay the full price of that for the next 18 months after you leave work and have healthcare that way. A lot of people don't want to pay that full price because sometimes it's very expensive. So they would rather pursue more of the government-based options, also known as ACA or Obamacare. So the ACA plans, when it comes to healthcare, have income earning limits for you to qualify for a subsidy. Okay, and if you earn $1 over the subsidy limits, you completely lose your whole subsidy. All right, so I would recommend you look into that and what those limits are. It's just over $49,000 for single filers and just over $67,000 for joint filers for 2 people in the household. So if you are going to have more than $67,000 and I think it's $640 of income, and you're a married filing jointly filer, then you could lose your subsidy. So if you're looking at Roth conversions, you want to really be careful that you don't go above that, because it is MAGI. Okay, it's not just your AGI, it's your modified adjusted gross income, not just your adjusted gross income. So it's basically all sources of income, including capital gains, including non-taxable interest from municipal bond funds. That all gets counted when it comes to looking at MAGI for healthcare. Something else to consider is your Medicare, your expected Medicare payments. So Medicare has something called IRMA. And what IRMA is if you earn over certain amounts of money, you could potentially be subject to additional payments for Medicare. They don't start out too bad, but if they get higher, they can be up in the multiple thousands of dollars per year. So this is something that you want to consider if you're looking at Roth conversions, because Medicare has a 2-year look back rule where they take your income from 2 years prior, and that's how they judge what you should be paying for Medicare for the next following year. So if you increase your income, because when you're doing a Roth conversion, you're essentially increasing your income because you're taking a distribution from your IRA account, which is a taxable event. This could impact whether you want to, how large of a conversion you want to do, and how much the actual value of that conversion is to you. Okay. Something else to consider is financial aid. That could come into play as well if you're in the realm of financial aid and dealing with someone who's still in college. Okay, those are all things you might want to consider. All right. Okay, this one is a more in-depth subject, and so we're going to talk about this more next week. But if you're going to be considering relocating and moving to another state now or in retirement, this could have a big impact on whether a Roth conversion actually makes sense for you. Okay, if you are, let's say, living in Florida right now and you have no state tax, well, to do a Roth conversion, all you have to worry about is federal tax. But if you're planning to move to somewhere like North Carolina, and I believe their state tax is about 5.5%, well, if you're going to move to North Carolina, and you're going to have to pay an extra 5.5% in state tax, well, that may impact the value of your Roth conversion. So you may want to consider doing your conversions while you're in Florida and then possibly reevaluating that once you get to North Carolina. And vice versa. If you're in a high tax state today and you're going to be moving to a low tax or a no tax state, well, then that's something you may really want to consider if doing a Roth conversion is going to be right for you. So a lot of things here you want to be asking yourself if it's right for you. Okay, so I think that's what I have for you today. I'm going to talk more about this next week, like I mentioned. I'm going to check here for questions, and let's see if there's any questions you have that I can try to answer for you before we wrap up for today. And so let me pull up here. So first of all, was this helpful? And second of all, what questions do you have? Okay, so where's my questions at? Where's my little... I know I have to think I'll pull them up here. Let's see. All right, so I'm not seeing I have my little thing I usually pull up where I can pull the comments on the screen, but for some reason it's not popping up today. I love doing these live because I can interact with you, but at the same time, there's always just little things that are going to come up that sometimes, are not fully in our control. So let's see here. Yeah, I'm not seeing that thing. Okay, anyway, so we'll just answer the questions I'm seeing here. I'll read them off and then we'll talk about them. Okay, so... all right. What questions do we have? Okay. So Janet says, we have about 3 million total in retirement accounts, 90% that is non-Roth. I'm 62 and husband is 65. How much do I convert per year? I was thinking about converting up to 24% income bracket, maximum amount. Okay, Janet. So you are somebody that really should get advice, okay? If you have that much money, 90% in pre-tax, you're probably talking hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of tax savings or potential taxes you could be paying over time. So these are big numbers. So these are not numbers you want to just go willy-nilly and just say you're going to go up to the 24% bracket. You're going to definitely be somebody, if you go to the 24% bracket, you're going to be looking at potential Medicare surcharges, okay? So that could be an additional $5,000 or $7,000 a year very easily there, and that's going to last for a couple of years, plus all the taxes that you could end up paying now and in the future. So that particular question, I would highly advise that you work with a professional and get that worked out, because I don't think this is a question that should be just guessed on, okay? All right. Twyla asks, are there yearly limits? Okay. So Twyla, there's no yearly limits on how much you can convert. So this is something that people sometimes have a little bit of confusion around. So there is something called a contribution to a Roth IRA account, right? Then that does have a limit per year, and you have to have earned income. Okay. So if you don't have earned income, you can't contribute to a Roth account. But what we're talking about today is a conversion. So conversion is different. It's just a different C word. So conversion is where you move money directly from a pre-tax IRA account to a Roth IRA. And there's technically no limit on that, but there's definitely a smart place to be because you don't want to convert too much because you could go too high. So you want to really look at what makes the most sense for you and your particular situation and make a decision there. But there's no sort of limit per se that you're going to be limited to for a conversion. Okay, good question though. All right, let's see what else we got here. Okay, and get your questions in now, folks, if you have questions, because once I'm done, I'm done. Okay, so Sue asks, does doing the Roth conversion justify the significant increase in Medicare Part B? Okay, so good question. In many cases it can, Sue. It depends how high you're going to go. So it depends on how you're going to go. So if you're going to get a increase in Part B, which let's say we have, let me pull up my little cheat sheet here, and we can talk about this a little bit. So this increase is something that's going to stay with you for a little while. Okay, so you don't want to just do it willy-nilly. Okay, you want to make sure you're making the right decision. So okay, so if you this is I only have 2019 here. I don't think I have 2020 here with me. But for Part B, if you go over that limit, if you go over $85,000 for single filers and $170,000 of income for joint filers, you're going to go from $135.50 per month to $189.60. So that's about $60 per month. It's not too crazy. And you're going to add on your Part D as well, an additional $12.40 for that. So that one's not so bad. Once you go to the next level, that's when it starts getting pretty bad because you're going to go from $135.50 to $270.90 in 19, an additional $31.90 for Part D. So now we're talking thousands of dollars in that case. So this is where you want to make sure you're asking all these questions that I brought in for you today to consider and look at the overall situation on what it looks like for you now and in the future. But very good question, and I think that's something you might want to do the numbers on there, okay? So Nick, I just can't tell, it says Nick and Marty, but should I wait until 59.5 to convert to take advantage of lower tax rate? Nick, so what I'm taking away from this question is if you retire, I think it sounds like you're going to retire at 59.5 and your tax and your income is going to go down at that point. That sounds like it would make sense, but it could make sense to do a little bit before, just depending on what you're expecting to have as far as income post-retirement. Because if you have a very large pre-tax account that is going to be just a very large distribution that you're required to take later, it might make sense to start your conversions earlier. We have clients that are doing conversions in their 50s, and honestly, I do them for myself. If I ever have a low income year, then I'll do them for myself. And I just turned 40 this year, so I don't think age is the right way to choose. I think your income level, current and future expected income level, is the right way to choose. Okay, so that's how I would look at it there. All right. Okay, so Barbara asked if I have an office in Jackson or Orlando, Florida. No, unfortunately we don't, but we do work virtually with clients. We have clients in 37 states, Barbara, so we do this virtually and we can help you out regardless if you're in Florida. We have a few clients in Florida there, so can definitely help you out there. All right, let's see. Next question we have. Okay, so Paula asked, when calculating your tax rate, do you subtract the standard deduction rate from earned income to come up with your tax bracket? So essentially, yes, Paula. You're always going to have your standard deduction and maybe more if you itemize, but you're going to start with your standard deduction. So it'll be 0 up to a certain amount. And then as I talked about in slide, I think 5 or 6, the next portion of your income is going to be the 10% bracket. Then you go to 12% bracket, and then you're going to have 22. So yes, you would include all of that. And then you have to also take account for state tax brackets as well. So there is a lot that goes into this, folks, but there was a lot of questions about this. And so I wanted to try to really break this down and give you the questions that you should be asking for yourselves if this is right for you. But the potential benefits, let's go back to a couple benefits because I think this could be very powerful for you to see. Let's see. So if we go here, we have a program we use for clients that really helps us estimate the potential benefits and what the value of looking at a potential Roth conversion for a client could be. Okay, so in this case, this example that I used, for this client, for them to do a conversion schedule here, starting at 64 and then going all the way through to about 80, it's expected to be worth about $190,000 more tax-adjusted dollars to this particular client. So this could be a very, very valuable procedure and process to go through, but you want to make sure you're looking at the numbers and doing the numbers right. So like in this case, since we're converting to the 12% bracket, we would start converting next year to about $80,000, so $79,606. Then the following year, about $76,000, $73,000, $76,000, and so forth, right? So we're going to be converting for this client all the way until they're about 83. But the benefit here is if we do this, we can get all of their money to a 100% tax-free Roth account. And not only that, we're going to, we're going to add $190,000 plus of tax-adjusted wealth to their portfolio and bring them from a 20% tax-free estate to a 100% tax-free estate because all the money will be in Roth. So this could be a really, really beautiful thing, a very, very powerful thing to consider depending on your individual situation. Okay, so hopefully this was helpful for you. I am going to throw my website up here. Oops, let's see here. That's not what I wanted. All right, let's see here. I'm going to put my website up. So if you want some help with this and you want to potentially see if going through the process of mapping out a tax strategy and looking at Roth conversions are right for you, we do offer a complimentary consultation. And to schedule that call, you can go to keepitsimplefinancial.com/talk and schedule a call at a time that works for you. There you'll find my calendar page. And what we'll do on that call is really talk with you about your overall situation, figure out where you're at, where you're currently trying to go, and talk about the current variables that you're dealing with when it comes to planning out your retirement. And if it seems like some of you might be a good fit for maybe something like this or maybe some other retirement planning, we actually have multiple programs to offer depending on what your needs are to help you with your retirement planning. We do offer virtual services as well, so we'd love to speak with you if you're open to that. And to be honest, right now, most people aren't going to offices anyways because coronavirus is still rampant, and most of you folks are in the kind of high risk category if you're above 60. So if you'd like to work with somebody virtually and you'd like some help with this and help mapping out the strategy, we would love to speak with you. And if you can go to our website here at keepitsimplefinancial.com/talk, schedule a time that works for you. We'd be more than happy to spend some time with you and seeing if you're a good fit for what we do. So hopefully you enjoyed this today. Next week on Sunday, right about the same time, we're going to talk about state taxes and some things to consider there when it comes to Roth conversions and how it may or may not impact you. Okay, so have a great weekend, folks. I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time. All right, bye-bye now.